My name is Mark Beckman, and I'm doing the interview today. We have with us Elmer Ruschman, who is going to tell us about his experiences in the Second World War. And we're doing this at the Pleasant Ridge branch of the Cincinnati Public Library. The date is October 23rd. And we'll try to go through with Elmer what his experiences, what his feelings were during this very important time. And I think this whole project is very, very important because at least when I did some other interviews for another radio program that I developed, there were 1,200 World War II veterans dying every day. And those kind of numbers makes it very, very important that we go about the business of getting this material together. One of the problems with not doing interviews with people who were there is that there's an old game that used to be played where you stood 10 or 12 people in a row, and the first one would whisper a story to the next one, and then they would whisper it on down the line, and then the last one would stand up and tell the story. And if 10% of it was the same, it would be a lot. And I think that's the danger of our current, with the Second World War, that as we go on and on without documentation like this is today, we really won't have the true story of what took place. And what took place in the Second World War, I don't believe, personally, and very many people agree with me, and I'm sure Elmer would agree, what took place hasn't been repeated. There was a certain sense of everyone here in the United States being in total support, and there was something about the brotherhood that these men and women, brotherhood and sisterhood, had. This is in no way trying to downplay the Korean War and Vietnam, and certainly our current situation, but it was a special time which has to be remembered properly. Elmer, what did you do before you were in the service?
Well, I got a job at a local drugstore down there in Silver Grove.
In Kentucky.
Yeah, in Kentucky. And I got a job right before the 1937 flood. It's a flood area, Silver Grove, like Melbourne is where I live. I went into the drugstore one day, get some medicine for my dad. When I paid for it, the druggist says, "You working anywhere?" I said, "No." At that time, wasn't any jobs, Depression days. He says, "You want to work here?" Asked me if I wanted to work for him. Who the heck wouldn't work for somebody in a drugstore? Ice cream and everything else that you need, candy. And he said, "You can start tomorrow." Boy, I was in heaven. $1 a day. 8 in the morning till 6 at night. But that's what some of the adults got paid. So I was a wealthy man. It was so nice that I didn't even have to ask for a job that anybody else had just loved to have. And I stayed with him for 4.5 years or so. Then I worked for railroad, the C&O Railroad, Chesapeake. At the yards there in Silver Grove. Of course, I made a little more money there. And I had a good time with docs. Should I tell you about the flood?
Well, that's another whole subject. That was.
Anyway, I started down there and only worked a few months, and then that 37 flood came along. And got all the way up to the second floor, as high as the middle mark in the windows.
wasn't much drugstore business going on then.
No. Well, he had a whiskey license.
Oh,
Fellas used to come there, and Doc says, one of them rode pretty close, and he says, "Doc, give me a pint of so-and-so," whatever it was. Doc acted like he's going to throw it out there to him. He said, "Oh, Lord, have mercy, don't do that. I'll go over there and get it." But anyway, when I worked for the railroad, I stayed there for 39 years. I took my retirement when I was 60 years old.
now you worked for the railroad, and I assume that you had an interruption of service from the railroad, or did that start after the war or before the war?
Oh, right before.
Right before the war.
Yeah, when I finished working for Doc in 1941, I think it was 41. It was in the 30s. Anyway, let's see what I was going to say now.
Well, it's,
Yeah.
but so I noticed on your information here, you were drafted in 42.
Yeah.
I was only 7 years old when the war started, but for someone of your age, where were you? What were you doing when December 7th came along, 1941?
Well, I'll tell you what I was doing. I was with about 3 other buddies of mine. We were target practicing with rifles. And we did that for the afternoon, and then when we started going back to one of them guys' houses where we started from, and they told us Pearl Harbor was bombed. Well, none of us knew where it was, but I knew we was going to get in the war. Even when I was 1935 or so, Hitler's going bad. Anybody my age surely knew that we were going to get into it. No way staying out. Lindbergh had a thing going at that time.
He was a little bit unpopular.
Yeah, but not with me, he wasn't.
No, well.
My brother and I went over to see him in the Taft Auditorium.
Oh, yeah.
And the place was so crowded that we got to sit up as close as you and I right now next to Lindbergh on the stage. They put us up on the stage. It was so crowded. I liked what I heard. I didn't want to go in the war. I knew if I'd ever get in the war and they'd fire one shot, it would hit me. I always knew I'd get killed.
Well, you were wrong.
Yeah, made a liar out of myself. I was glad.
Yeah, I'm sure. When you were drafted, you were drafted into the Army Air Corps at the time? Or?
No, I was drafted. I went over, well, my druggist told me, he says, "Elmer, when you have to go to the Army or war, go in the Navy." So I went over in, I'd say, July or so of 42. The Army was right behind me here, ready to grab me. And I went over and joined the Navy, got in line, big long line, and it didn't seem to move, and I thought, the heck with this. I'll go over and join the Marines upstairs. Went up there, and did the same thing, and bigger, longer line, and it didn't move, so I moved. I took a streetcar back to Fort Thomas and picked up the car that I was driving and went home and waited for the Army to grab me. And they grabbed me and put me in the regular Army. And after some of them tests, I guess I did pretty well on things, although I didn't have much of a, didn't even have high school, only 8th grade. But I must have done pretty well. They just needed somebody short that could fly an MB-17s. And they put me in the Army Air Corps, which I was so thankful for because that's what I wanted. When I was a real young fellow, there was a little airport up in Ross, Kentucky, next little town up east of Melbourne. They had 2 planes there. man and wife, Albert Boyers and his wife. And I'd watch them playing, boy, at that time they could zoom down low and all this here stuff. Boy, I wish I could do that someday. So I got what I wanted.
So what got you into you were a radio technician?
Radio operator.
Radio operator.
You know.
What got you into that part of the flying business?
Well, they sent me to radio school, and you have to learn that code, you know.
Oh yeah, Morse code.
Yeah, and they said you could pick up the crew member's picture and pick the radio operator out because he's already crazy from listening to all that code. And that's not the truth. You hear it so often, you know, and ditch and dogs, and first thing you know, you go about half crazy and you pick it up just like that. Don't have any trouble after you're half crazy.
Just that you have to be half crazy.
Yeah,
To be able to do it. I know my father was a amateur radio operator, and he had, I forget how many words per minute he had to recognize to get it. But and then I used to be able to do it as long as it was done really slow. But just like, you know, you get into it, but once you stop, do you still think you can read or hear Morse code?
Yeah,
to this day?
I can still pick out the things.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I guess it stays with you.
Yeah.
Well, when you went in, how soon after you were drafted were you sent overseas to?
Well, let's see, I was drafted in October, and by
October 42.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
October 43, I went over.
Oh, okay.
I started over. We got over there, we had a big long delay up at Newfoundland on our trip going over.
You went over by ship or by plane?
Airplane. Went to Scotland. Well, I was with the 401st Bomb Group that I took my training with. And it was at Great Falls, Montana. And we went to a little extra air base close by. Cutbank is a little oil town. And that's where we flew from. And then another one at Glasgow, Squadron. That way we got to know our ground crew. It was nice. Great Falls was our headquarters. One group stayed there, and the other one went to Lewiston, Montana. So I liked Montana. People were good to you out there. They were really nice. I was really pleased.
It's a slower life out there.
Yeah, colder.
Oh yeah, it surely is.
At that time, I was there in the summertime.
Now, when you did go over, were you then assigned to a group over there right away?
Yeah, well, we went over to 401st, and when we got there, Holbrook, we were supposed to go to Deanthorpe was the name of their new airfield. Well, it wasn't finished yet. And I didn't think they were going to let us sit around wait till they could finish it. So they put us where we landed at Holbrook. They had men that were finished with their 25 missions, and some were losing men. So, and they just transferred us there, which was a good break for us. We got in with an outfit that had been there for quite a few months.
Now, Polbrook, you told me before we started, is about 70 miles north of London.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a nice airfield. It was a pretty airfield. It had grass, no mud, couldn't mount anything, you know. And it was a nice place.
Were most of the airfields over there in England, were they just grass, or had they made concrete runways and so forth?
This one, I think, was the first concrete runways.
Oh, you had concrete.
Yeah, we did concrete. That's why That's why they started the first daylight raids from there,
Mhm.
within B-17.
Tell me a little bit about, I know the B-17 bomber was the Flying Fortress, but is what it was called. But the pictures I've seen and people I've talked to, it was about the most indestructible airplane that was ever built. I've seen pictures of them coming back with half a wing gone, and tell me a little bit about what made the B-17 what it was.
I don't know what made it. I guess Boeing Company.
Yeah, the Boeing made it, that's for sure.
And other companies made them too. Like ours was made by quite a few different people, but it wasn't worth a darn. It wasn't worth a darn. The pilot got so that he says, if he was flying tail end Charlie, the rear man, it was okay there, but he says it didn't have good supercharges, things like this. He says the one that was on our airplane, you could give it extra gas, couldn't go anywhere, and all of a sudden it would catch you, like an old automobile.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you're going too fast and you got to stop again. No, don't stop, you just slow up.
Now, when you had a plane like that, how long did you have to put up with that before, or did you that's just the way it was and you stuck with it?
We made quite a few starts, but we only finished, as far as I was concerned, we only finished one rig with it.
Oh, okay.
But then we picked up whatever they gave us. We didn't have a different one then.
When you went, when you started flying missions, I've always wondered this, 18, 20-year-old young man going and not having any experience with hearing. Of course, you did. You were with 300 fellas out shooting rifles. But some of the young men had never even heard a gunfire before, and now all of a sudden people are shooting at you and trying to kill you. What was your first impression when you realized that there were people out there that really didn't want you to stay around long?
Well, it didn't bother me too much because I expected to get killed anyway. It didn't make much difference when. But I didn't worry about it. I ain't kidding you.
That's an unusual answer to, or a statement, because I've talked to several people, and one fellow who was on Iwo Jima for 30 days, and he said the people that came back were the ones who knew that they just weren't going to die. They weren't going to let them. They just had a very positive attitude. The ones that thought that they were going to die did. You proved that wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, well, some fellas told me, that I mentioned it at reunions and so on. I didn't feel that way, they'd say. Says, I always thought it would happen to the other guy. I said, yeah, but if it's just you and I, it makes me the other guy. Yeah. So I lost again, but I won in the long run.
Yeah. How many missions did you fly from over?
When I went over, I was supposed to go 25 and return to the States. When I got close to 20, they changed it to 30. 30th one was D-Day, and I figured I was done, but I wasn't done. They gave us orders to fly indefinitely. In other words, keep on flying, we'll tell you when to quit. They made 3 more, and on our last one we had a real bad one. We had other bad ones too, but this one was a real bad one. They gave us a 4-day pass to try to forget some things.
Well,
And then we went to London, and MP stopped anybody that wore wings and says if you got over 30 missions, you're finished. You can go back to the base and probably start on your way home. But you had to fly one of them more B-17s, and some of them didn't go all the way, and we wanted to go all the way. So you had the option of staying on the base until a ship would take you. And I finished in June the 14th of 44 with the last mission, and then Then I stayed, gave me a small job, didn't amount to anything. Stayed on the base until September sometime, and then started on the way back.
September of '44.
Mhm.
And then when you came back to this country, were you then, you weren't discharged now, or were you?
No, came back on Queen Elizabeth.
Oh.
I got a big job on there too. I was a sergeant of the guard for a certain length of time in a certain area. It was nice. I had about 12 guys under me. Not under me. I was the shortest one there. but it was fun. It was nice.
How long did it take you to get back?
I think it was 6 days.
Oh, that's what it is.
Zigzagging and so on.
Yeah. They,
And a fella died on there. One time they called me Sergeant of the Guard. I went over and said, the man in here is sick. I said, I looked him over. He was a ship worker. He was from Jamaica, I think. And he was dead. He died. Then the next morning, they had the funeral at the sea. Had him tilted. First time I ever seen that. It was sort of sad, although I didn't know the guy.
Yeah.
But it was still sad.
Tell us a little bit about what it was like flying into the German territory, where you knew and the flak and the ME-109s and all of that were after. What was the feeling or the approach of the crew to knowing that was going to happen, and what was it like when it did happen?
Well, I don't know. It did happen many times, but I don't know. I just wasn't just too scared. I mean, it didn't scare me too much. I was going to get killed anyway. So. But one time, could I tell you something else?
Sure.
When we were in training out in Cutbank, Montana, September 12th, I think it was, 43. We were on a trip, supposed to be teaching a pilot how to drop bombs in case something happens to the bombardier. And I thought my life would be ended there. Didn't know it at that time, but we flew over a makeshift bomb run, big circle down there in the ground. We were at 10,000 feet. And the pilot he set it up on automatic pilot and then went down in the bombardier's compartment to learn how to drop the bombs. The assistant engineer was flying with this just a skeleton crew, only had pilot, co-pilot, navigator. Our bombardier did go along, and navigator did go along. We needed a bombardier. Myself and our assistant engineer. And we didn't have a regular co-pilot. Our co-pilot was a big man. And if he'd have been, I don't know who the other co-pilot was that day. And he dropped a few of them bombs down in open bomb bay and right behind the open things, looking down, see how close he came, with the smoke bombs, of course. And he dropped a few of them, and I heard him say on the interphone, he says, "Give it a hard left." Went up like this and almost turned over. And I remember what my engineer told me one time. If you happen to roll over in a B-17, you might overcome that. But if you go in a spiral dive, you're a dead man. And we went like this for a little while, and then circles, and then circles like this. And I wanted to get out, and I was waiting for the pilot to tell me. We were falling real fast. Turns were getting tighter. And I knew I was on my last ride. I tried to get out without word from the pilot. And all I had to do was raise my foot up about that high and fall out. But pressure kept me down. I even tried to do this to him. Nothing. And instead of being frantic, a real peaceful feeling came over me. Boy, I didn't care what happened. I was real happy. And that's a bad sign. And we cleared. The pilot told us later that the reason he didn't tell us to jump was he was trying to get back to his place. And his back was on the floor like my feet were when we went in to die. He did make it back as far as right underneath. It was just like an old cellar door when you come out of the bombardier's compartment, navigator's compartment. And he did tell him, two fellas at the controls, what switches to throw, and we made it. And he told us we fell from 10,000 feet, 3,000, so that would have put us at 7. And then it takes more than 3 to pull it out because of the pressure. And he said we were going tremendous speed because of the pull of the engines and the thing. And he said, well, that would have left us 4,000, but it sounds like a whole lot, but the altitude it got back at 38. We cleared by 162 feet. I looked at them wings when they were coming down, I looked at each one, and boy, they were almost flapping like my big ears. Says, I hollered to this one over here first, hang on, oh, hang on, I hollered to the other one. And he did, and boy, oh boy, I figured I'd be splattered all over Montana.
Well, that's
the closest one we ever had. Not many people came out of a spiral dive from that time.
No, that's for sure. Well, I was in the Air Force and I flew a long time after you were, but I know that the aerodynamics of it, and it's very hard to do when you're in that situation. What's the crew of a B-17? I know there were pilot, there was a co-pilot. How many were in the crew and what was their job?
Okay, it's 10 men, pilot, co-pilot, and bombardier, navigator. That's our officers, and then engineer and radio operator. And had 2 waist gunners, a tail gunner, and a ball turret gunner.
Oh, okay.
10 men should be.
Who manned the top turret?
Engineer.
Oh, the engineer did. Okay. I know there was a turret in the top right behind or fairly close to the back of it.
And I was right behind Bombay. I had no. People don't know this, but we flew with windows wide open.
You know, and I've seen pictures of the waist gunners.
Fresh air.
There was an area open like this, and
but mine was too.
Yeah.
Mine was.
And it does. I think officially, if I remember from what they taught us, the temperature goes down 3 degrees for every 1,000 feet that you're up there. And when you're up 15, 20,000 feet and it's winter to begin with, that gets kind of cold.
27,000 we used to fly.
Yeah.
When Doolittle came in as boss, he brought us down to 12,000 feet. He wanted all the German fighter planes to come up and shoot us down. And then he had P-51s that were supposed to shoot them down. That's true.
Yeah. Well, your sheet here says that, well, no, first of all, tell me about the crew. I know you had a book that, about the crew that, 2 of them won Medal of Honor and so forth. Tell us about that crew. You were with them for a couple of missions.
Yes, sir. It would have been February, well, let's see, actual mission took care of, or they also got all these medals on the 20th of February of 44. On the 18th, I was in my barracks. I was always handy for the guys that come in and give us extra jobs. And the same fellows that woke us up in the mornings.
Maybe, excuse me, just a minute. Maybe as we're talking, maybe you could zoom in on the book, and it'll give you some idea. And also give some people that don't know the idea of what the B-17 looked like. Go ahead, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah. Okay, and fellow came in and says, got to go up for a couple hours. Fellow wants to get his engines checked over for 4 hours. So I didn't know the crew, they were new. I knew some of the enlisted men, didn't know any of the officers. And they were a new crew. They lived in the barracks next to us. We were in barracks 14. They were in, I think it was 13, which is a bad one. And it was a nice day. Nobody said anything to me on the interphone. I did talk to, I knew the fellow that was the engineer. Let's see what that was his name. Anyway, he was the engineer, and nobody said anything to me on the squawk box. And time was going. I had my watch, of course. And we were over 4 hours, and nobody said anything. Finally, the navigator called and says, "Get me a fix." Well, I could call a station, ground station, called 3 ground stations, and then they would follow my signal as I held the key down. And we were down in southern England, and we were too far away to get back to our air base before dark. So we had to stay overnight at an English air base. Don't know where it was anymore. In the morning, we came back to Polbrook, and the bosses were waiting for us. And the engineer and I didn't have to go in, but they did, and they were in there a long time. And I know they caught heck, and I'm sure they did, you know. But then the following day, I was with my own crew, and in the formation, we were right next to them. And they got hit by an enemy plane. It almost decapitated the co-pilot, and shrapnel came off from his armor plate and hit the pilot, knocked part of his face off. Of course, I heard this in later times, you know, and I didn't know what happened then. And almost as soon as it hit, as soon as they got hit, or real close afterwards, one fella opened the bomb bay doors, no doubt bombardier, and jumped. And the plane went into a dive, and I couldn't see him anymore. Had our own problems. We can't help them, poor fellas. Not like being on the ground where you can run and help somebody. You have to watch out for yourself. And we weren't even to the target yet. At the last I seen of them, I didn't expect to see them anymore. And found out later that the engineer came out at the Top Gun, like you said. And he pulled it out of that dive with them 2 fellas laying around. And eventually the navigator came back, and between the navigator and this engineer and fella in the ball turret, they took turns. Of course, the windows were blowing out, all that fresh air coming in, and freezing to death. By golly, they made it back not only to England, but they made it back to our air base, and our air base was hard to find. It was. I don't know why, but many people said it was hard to find, and they made it back. And they called the tower and told them their problems. Our tower told them to set it on, they're going to set it up on an automatic pilot with their instructions. They said the pilot's still living. We don't want to do that. And told them to go up to 8,000 feet or 6,000 feet, something like that, and let the other crew members jump, parachute. And the 2 fellas, the engineer and the Navigator were going to try to land it. They made first attempt and they were too high. Another crew went up, Colonel Burns went up with them in another plane and trying to tell them what to do. But the second trip, the second attempt was bad too. They couldn't make it. And third trip, they crashed and it killed the navigator and the engineer that was trying to save the pilot's life. The pilot lived through the crash, but he died later in the hospital. They had one heck of a ride, poor fellas. And some of them fellas went back and flew again, finished their missions. Some of them didn't, and I didn't blame them a bit.
Yeah, that's something about war in general, that it's hard for people like myself or for anyone sitting here to really understand the emotion and like you said, the brotherhood that exists between men and women in some cases that are there, and it becomes their family, and they any number have gladly given their lives to make sure that their friends or their friend doesn't get killed or doesn't die with them.
This story would never have been told like it was told, except for the man that made this book.
His name is
Rick School.
Rick School. Is he? Who was he? Was he a member of the crew, or was he?
No, he was a real young man. He's a young fella. Was with his wife. He came to one reunion in Omaha, and he came there to find out some information about this crew. And myself and another fellow from my barracks were talking about that crew. Took walking as we were with our wives, and he introduced himself and says, "I came here to find out some information." He says, "First man I talked to, I got the information I was looking for. A man had seen it go down and had flown with the crew." He came out with this soft cover first, and I'm in there about 5 times, I guess. And, sure, if it hadn't been for him, all you'd have read in the history books was, well, they got 2 Medal of Honors. That's about all you'd have heard.
Well, that's, as I said at the beginning, that's what's important about documenting things like this.
Everything in there is true, everything. And it's verified by, what the heck's his name?
Jeff Rogers?
No, he was the one that wrote the book. The great 8th Air Force man,
What, the commander there of the...
he was a historian.
Oh.
Roger Freeman.
Oh. Okay.
Roger Freeman. It's in there. He says it's the highest decorated crew in the whole 8th Air Force.
I notice you have some other things over here on the side. Let's take a look at these. Those are, I guess, the medals that you want.
Yeah.
Taking a little bit back here. Well, that's, I used to know all of these. I know this is the Distinguished Flying Cross.
That's right.
And
that's the Air Medal, and I got 3 oak leaf clusters, means I got it 4 times. And of course, the good old conduct. I don't know why I lied to myself into that. And these others don't mean a whole lot. That's a radio insignia, 8th Air Force.
this is for the European theater, wasn't it? This one right here.
This one is, yeah. And these are either a Freedom Medal or something like that. It don't mean much to me, but I got them anyway.
And that's a tech sergeant. Remember that?
Yeah, it's a tech sergeant.
That's your dog tag.
tags. Yeah.
And you know, that's one thing that you, for some reason, you never forget, is I know you know your serial number. What is it?
35666-101.
803-066-881. That's me.
And my brother went in the Army the same day I did, 2 of us. But he didn't have to stay long. He had bad feet going in, and they should never have taken him. But he got out after about 6 months. That's one of the best letters that I got. I was really pleased that he got out.
I noticed on your thing, you said also that you were in the South Pacific.
Yeah, after I came back from England, got a 21-day furlough. They go by in about a day and a half.
Yeah.
Then they sent us to Florida, down to Miami Beach, and broke the crew up, didn't need us anymore. And then they gave me a list of 4 different air bases that I could go to in the Air Transport Command. And I seen Great Falls on there, Great Falls, Montana. And I'd flown there before, liked the people, they were good to me. I'll try for that. They said not necessarily will you get the one you choose. I did. And I got out there. I was in charge of 4 other guys. We were all the same rank, but I was in charge of. When I got out there to the train station at the end of the line, I had a call up to the air base and ask for transportation. When I worked at the drugstore, I had a girlfriend by the name of, well, I better not mention her name. But we got along pretty well as far as friends were concerned. But nothing, but she came down in a Jeep to pick us up. Oh. She was a whack.
I'll be there.
And then when I got up to the air base, a few days, I seen a woman typing, and there was other workers in there too. And she had her name there too. Says, I asked one of the fellows that had been there a while, I said, is that girl married? No, and don't get any ideas. She don't go with any of us fellas. Seen her typing a few days later, and I says, what are you typing, Mary? Weekly notice at the airmen. You would know what that is too. I said, where do you have to send that? She says, headquarters. I says, where's headquarters? Lonkin Airport, Cincinnati, Ohio. I said, gee whiz, I live about 5 miles east on the other side of the river. And that's how we got started. Married to Leggy.
Oh.
While I was still in the service. I thought I'd better grab her before somebody else did. Otherwise, I'd never gotten married, but I had a guarantee not to go into combat anymore.
Oh.
And flying these air transport commands, that was great. That was just like
so that's
vacation.
That's where you were over in the South Pacific doing that.
Yeah, most of my trips took me to South Pacific. Some just deliver new airplanes. Never had a regular crew, get different pilots all the time.
Well, that sounds like good duty.
Oh, it was. You had to stay in Frisco when you went to South Pacific. And up on Nob Hill, we had 5 crew members. That was all it was. Pilot, co-pilot, navigator, engineer, and radio operator. That's all we took. And,
how long a trip was that when you, depending on where you went, of course? But
yeah, longest one was to Guam. Took a B-29 to Guam. And heck, I went to Eniwetok, Saipan, Kwajalein, quite a few of them, and always came back to Hawaii. Oh, Midway Islands too, I got up there. Seen them silly goony birds. Boy, they're comical.
Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of people, there's a point that a lot of people don't know that Midway Island is technically one of the Hawaiian Islands. It's at the very top end of the Hawaiian island chain. Of course, that's it's getting off the subject, but that's, I That a lot of people think that the Battle of Midway back in '42 was what really turned the tide of the war in our favor over in the South Pacific, or in the Pacific Theater. When you came back from the service, well, where were you? Well, then one question.
After we finished our missions, I wasn't much of a drinker. I liked my beer, but wasn't much of a drinker. But fellas, we waited a while before we went in to celebrate after we finished our missions. And we decided on a certain time we went into London. Or, yeah, I guess it was. No, we went to Peterborough, England. That's where we usually went anyway. Closest bigger town. And there was extra fellas that came with us, fellas that had flown, and one of them had quit. He said, "Could I go with you?" Sure, heck yeah. While we're celebrating, bought quite a few different things that we wanted. And it's getting pretty well loaded. And this fella that had flown before, he met a fellow officer that, hometown friend of this guy's. And he followed in with us too. He joined in with us. After we hoisted quite a few of them drinks, we went to a dance. I couldn't dance, but I could drink while they were dancing. When the dance was over, we had to go down to his landing and then down, This fellow that we met, the officer, he jumped from the top to the bottom. We didn't know it, but he had been in circus and he knew how to do this stuff, but we didn't know that. So we ran down the steps. About the same time, two of them big fuzzy hats in the English policemen wear, they were just coming in, I guess, to close up that dance that they were having. And they checked him over and says, "Oh, he's not hurt bad." Says, "We'll take care of him. We'll just let him sleep it off and we'll take him back to his place." I argued with him. I said, "I'll take care of him. I know him real well. I'll be sure he gets back to the base." Never seen a man before in my life.
I'm sorry.
Next morning I woke up and I didn't feel just too happy. Not near as happy as I was the night before. Then I checked things out and I said, "Okay, who brought me home?" "Nobody brought you home." He says, "You kept saying, it's the last bus, we got to get on there." He kept hollering and made sure everybody got on there. I started checking my equipment and I had my wallet, still had money in it. And I had an extra wallet, didn't have any money in it. I didn't know if I rolled a guy or what. And I was pretty tired, I guess. And he had an ID in there. And I went to the headquarters and asked where this base was. And it was at Deanthorpe, where I should have gone if the airfield had been ready. So I borrowed a bicycle and went over and I found him. I said, "I got your billfold." "Yeah, I know it." He said, "I gave it to you last night." I said, "What'd you give it to me for?" He says, "You was the only sober one there." Big surprise.
Yeah. You have in this sheet that you gave me, you have down here some certain things. One of them it just says Bremen, Oldenburg, November 26th.
Oldenburg was what I thought was my mother's hometown. She came from Germany when she was 19 years old. In 1911, I think she came here. 1909, something like that. Young girl, about 18, 19 years old. And lady brought her from her hometown. This lady lived in Cincinnati. She was related to the Bankins that had yeah,
right down the street here.
Is that right down the street?
Yeah, Florist?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Right.
Was a relative of theirs that brought her over here.
Down the street over there.
Yeah, that's all right. I don't know which way it is anyway. And my mom died when she was 38 years old, left 7 children. And Pop took care of us as best he could. He had a hard time, but he did it. And Oldenburg, I thought was her hometown, but really she was in 1982, after I took my retirement, I went over to find the house she lived in. It was a picture that she had. It showed an old house, really. It was the end of a barn like they did in England and every place else. And I thought someday, out of the whole family, that I would be the one to find her hometown. And when I took my retirement, we took a month off, my wife and I, and we went over. And I told her I'm going to stay 3 days in town trying to find it. Went to different places while I was, never did find it at that time. And found a church she went to, and a school, things like this. As we walked through the town, I found a photographer named Kramer, and I remembered on the back of some of her pictures, Kramer's, things like that. Boy, I was thrilled.
Yeah.
And I was going to stay just 3 full days, and I was going to leave on the 4th day, whether I found it or not. On the 3rd day in the afternoon, we was going a different direction, and I seen watching all these pretty flower boxes and all this here in nice homes. Didn't pay attention to what was on this side, but I seen an ice cream sign on my right side. I told Mary, I got to get some ice cream. She didn't want any, so I went in and got one. And we came out on the steps. I faced a building that didn't mean a thing to me. Looked down the street, seen some nice big shade trees, and it was a warm August day. I said, let's go down there, Mary, and eat my ice cream under the shade of those nice trees. I turned around, it was Mary's, my wife, my mom's home.
Oh.
I would have known, or I could have asked anybody in town, they could have told me where it was. But I found it on the wall. It didn't look like anybody lived here anymore. I was supposed to meet a historian for the area there, but I made the mistake and came in a couple of days early. And the next day, the town historian, I met him, and he told me, and Mary said, I'll show you where your mom lived. I said, I think I found it yesterday. And I said, I don't think there's anybody living there. Yes, there is. When we came down there was an older fella. He would be young now compared to me. But he's a big man. And this man named Benkin, who was also related to these people. He said, he introduced us. The big fella came over and put his arms around me. He could speak English. Some Elizabeth's son. He couldn't get over that, you know. He didn't know Mom, but he knew of her from his mom and dad.
That's very special for people to find.
Took us in the house and showed us all around, and his wife was there. And gee, but just like, this is your life, Elmer Ruschman. I expected what was his name?
Ralph Edwards.
Ralph Edwards.
One thing that's come to my mind, and I've asked this question of other people that I've talked with, if you can put your finger on it, is there some way you can put your finger on how you came away from the Second World War different than when you went in?
I don't think I came back that much different. I don't know. I used to have some dreams at nights that I was going down the airplane, I'd be hollering, screaming, hollering, help, I don't know who was going to help me. But I came back about the same shape, I guess.
That's, have you ever been back or thought of going back to England and the area where you, in Polbrook and that area?
I went back on that same trip that I went to my mom's. We spent quite a few days in Europe, and the last 10 days I saved to go to the old air base. And we took a ride across the English Channel on one of those ships, you know, ferry boat. And we seen the White Cliffs of Dover, and we didn't have to worry about altitude clear. And by golly, we made good connections. We got a bus, took first a train to London, and then got a bus and went to a little town pretty close to Polbrook, and got a hotel, and was figuring on taking a taxi cab and going out to the airfield because I knew it was a distance. And when Mary called for a cab, they said, oh, there wouldn't be any for quite a while. Mary says, heck, let's just start walking. So we did, real pretty day. And finally found a tavern, an inn, and was at, I can't think the name of the town now. Anyway, I'd never been there before, but the first time we were in England, the fellas went down, the first time they were allowed to off the base anyway, they went to go to this tavern, and says, I didn't, they came back in a short time, you know, maybe a couple hours and they were back. That was unusual. But they said over here in England, they're allowed only so much beer, and if you drink it up, well, it's tough. Yeah. So I thought, boy, I'm never going to go there. So I drank beer at Polbrook, or not Polbrook, but the other place.
There's just about 2 minutes left.
Okay. I guess in sort of winding things up, Elmer, I'd like to first of all say how much we all appreciate what you and your friends, the thousands of them that were over there, what you did in those years, and how very grateful we are that you, and I could tell in some of the things that you were talking about that it was an emotional thing with you, still to this day, which you probably continue to be. But we really appreciate you coming and sharing these very, very personal thoughts and things with us. And hopefully 50, 75, 100 years from now, there'll still be archives and records that will tell the true story of what happened from December 7th, 1941 to August 15th, 1945. And I think that's very, very important. So again, thank you very much, and best of luck to you.
Got many more things to say. Many more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, this is a continuation of our interview with Elmer Ruschman at the Pleasant Ridge Public Library on Monday, October 23rd. And Elmer was just telling me about a story about documentary that they were going to make. Wonder if you'd repeat that for the camera.
Oh, yes, sir. The president of our armor group called me and he said, Elmer, they're going to make a documentary about the Valerie Polbrook. He says they're going to take regular fellas to simulate the crew. And since you were the radio operator, would you like to have that job? I said, heck yeah, who wouldn't? Be on the History Channel. So he said, you'll get a call in a few days from the company that's going to make it. And I did get the call. And, oh yeah, we're going to do this for you. We're going to come videotape you at your house and so on. Then I got a letter not too long after that, said, finances are not going to allow that, but if you come to the 8th Air Force reunion in, I think it was Tyler, Texas, we'll videotape you there. Well, I just came back from Montana for visiting my in-laws out in Montana. And I didn't even have time to make reservations for the 8th Air Force reunion, and I don't think I would have done it anyway. But anyway, they did make a documentary, and they used, we had Clark Gabler in bomb group too, and he only flew 5 missions, but he was 43 years old when he did it. And they used the same, Combat America was a thing that he made up. MGM sent, from World War II. And he did fly 5 missions in B-17 from our air base.
Another famous actor that was in the Air Force and flew a lot was Jimmy Stewart.
Sure. I got to see him one day.
Oh,
I didn't get to see him. We were leaving Peterborough in one of them GI trucks, and a fella, good friend of mine, was right alongside of me, and it was dark when we got on. There was other people already on it. I didn't know who I was sitting next to. And this fella says, "Here, Rush, want some candy?" Yeah, I took some out of a bag of candy. Handed it back to him. He says, "Give some to that. See if that fella next to you wants some. Want some candy?" "No, I don't think I'll want any." There was no mistaking who it was. And I didn't talk to him anymore because I know people like that like to be by themselves.
But you mentioned before we started this section of it about your flight jacket. Why don't you get that and show it?
I can still wear it too. Makes the other guys mad. But it's getting a little snug. This was my squadron insignia, and this was the group insignia. And used to have wings on in the back. Now the Wantus bar on top, or not Wantus bar, but knockabout. We had a problem with that. When we went overseas, it was knockabout. Later on, somebody wanted a picture that was this, what we had on our nose of our plane. And underneath here it says Wantus bar. They didn't put that part on there, but my pilot was sick at the time, and I tried to get things straightened out and call it knockabout, but he was sick and couldn't take care of it. And these are the missions that I flew, 33 missions, little bombers. I can still wear it, but it's getting snug.
Well, I took out my old Air Force uniform, and you've got me beat because I couldn't come close to fitting in mine. What's that? There's another picture there.
This thing?
That's your crew. That's your crew.
That's my bomber crew.
Yeah.
Now this, my assistant radio operator, when we were out in Montana, he told me, and I assumed he had told the pilot as well, that he was going to take our training with us, but he wasn't going to go overseas. I said, how are you going to get out of that? He said, I'm going to quit. And he did.
Make it a little more straight up and down, have some glare, yeah, great.
I just had a thought. I don't know if you at the time were able to do it. Did you, at Lunken Airport, when they had the B-17 in town recently, did you go over?
I go over every time.
I'm sure you probably do.
The lady up in the top part who works up there, she calls me. And I says, how many people do you call? She says, you're the only one I call.
Did you go up for a flight in it?
I never did pay for one, but I got about 2 or 3 free rides.
Yeah.
One fella paid just to see me go up. One young man.
Oh, really?
A relative of mine. $400 and some.
Oh, yeah, it was pricey.
Yeah.
What, these up here, those are the
Those are 50 caliber.
50 caliber machine gun bullets.
And this is similar to the monument that we have at Polbrook. We have a real nice monument here.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Oh, and Gable, when we got over there in England, a few days, they found out there was a place called the Church Army. You could get some tea and crumpets. People worked in there. And thought, well, since we're here, we might as well make ourselves Englishmen. So, big long line of men going in. Finally, we got inside, and was going to wind around until we got up to the tables. And I noticed a woman much older than me, elderly, and there's a lot of people in there going to help put out the tea and crumpets. And as I walked along, slowly, this woman was watching in my direction all the time. And when I got halfway, I knew she's either watching me or the guy ahead or behind me. When I got up to be served, she made sure she waited on me. And she says, my God, Sergeant, you know Clark Gable just left here a few days ago, and then she took a breath, and I thought she thinks I look like him. Then she finished. She says, the good Lord put a big set of ears on him, and he didn't forget you either. At least I had something he had.
Yeah. There's a note here about the over in England, the buzz bombs.
Oh, I was in the first bomb raid that they sent them over in, myself and a few of my buddies. And we were in a hotel, on German Street. Not spelled the same way as Germany, but it was pretty close. And towards the nighttime, of course, the buzz bombs started coming over. Sirens. The sirens over there were so sad, to hear them. Much different than ours. Had a sound so sad, mournful. And between also the hotels over there have flat tops. They don't have steeples. Yeah. And on them flat tops they had anti-aircraft guns that they would shoot at these buzz bombs or the other fighter planes. And between them shooting at those buzz bombs and the buzz bombs falling, well, we didn't get much sleep. And next morning we took off. When we left the hotel, I seen a fellow selling newspapers, a whole big page, 4 words: pilotless planes bomb London. I thought, boy, we're done for now. They can do all this and won't even lose anybody. That is from their side.
Now those were the V1s. The buzz bombs were the V1 rockets.
That happened after D-Day.
Yeah.
Shortly after.
And after that, there was also the V2s, which I think those were even more sinister. You didn't hear the buzz.
Yeah.
The,
Well, one time we're in the hotel, or in a restaurant over in England, in London, and ordered our food and so on. It was dark, and first thing you know, them sirens started blowing, and the German fighter planes or bombers were coming over, and we sit there waiting for our food, and finally got the food, and the water on them tables would be shaking. You hear them bombs dropping. And I asked the waitress, I said, "You think we ought to be getting out of here?" She says, "Eat your supper, Yank." That was 2 blocks away. So nothing's going on. They were so used to it, I guess.
And another note you have here is Colonel Burns to Bath, England. That caught my eye. We were just in Bath about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, were you? Well, I'll tell you what, Colonel Burns was a lieutenant colonel at that time. And nice fellow. And it was a nice day, and he says, seen me out, just walking around somewhere, and he says, "What are you doing today?" "Nothing." "How about going with me?" "Where are we going?" "Mission of Mercy." I said, "Do I need my oxygen mask?" He says, "Not if you can breathe above the treetops." So, just him and I got on the B-17. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to have a whole crew. But him being a lieutenant colonel and second in command anyway. And I stayed back where I belonged, in the radio room, always did. He didn't even take a co-pilot, just the 2 of us. And we got down in Bath, England, and I seen a woman in a nurse outfit get on the front section of the airplane. And he called on the squawk box and he said, "I'm going to buzz the field, let me know how it is back there." "Okay." So he buzzed the field and he says, "How was it?" "Oh, it wasn't too bad." "Well, we'll do it again." This time, he says, "How was that?" And I says, "Well, if I'd have been in the ball turret and had the guns pointing down, they'd be pointing back." And he said, "That's good enough." And I'll tell you what, almost every reunion that he has come to, he would mention that.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir. And then he also told me that he married that woman.
Oh.
And he's still married to her. Now he died. He just died a few years ago, Colonel Burns.
I'm just looking at some of the notes you have. May 24th, London.
Oh, a fellow named London? Okay, well, I'm going to say his name. But we had a different co-pilot this time. We were on a mission. And doing pretty well. We got hit by flak, and it hit right behind that co-pilot. And some of it even hit a window on my radio room, but it didn't hurt me any. It shattered the window a little bit, and it hit other places too. And usually the pilot would say, "Check in," as soon as you hit. He didn't say anything. And we're going down, but a slow glide. And we left the formation. We tried to get a hold of the pilot, and he wouldn't talk. Didn't know if he was dead or what, injured. And other guys were trying to get him. Only one can talk at a time on the squawk box. And we were already away from the formation and still going down. But like I said, it wasn't too bad. I've seen quite a few of them, and I kept watching those engines. So I've seen them with a little whisper, and once in a while, wham, everything's gone. And I finally thought, I might be the last one here. So I went back, and the turret gunner was already waiting at the escape hatch, and the tail gunner was already there. 2 waist gunners, they still had their headsets on. And they asked me, "What's wrong up there?" I said, "I don't know." And about that time, we started gaining a little bit of control again. And the pilot says, everybody back there? There's anybody back there? These fellows with their headsets. He said, yeah, we're all still here. Well, tell them get back to their positions. Everything's okay now. But he wouldn't tell us what happened. And didn't say anything for maybe a week or so. And one of them asked him, he says, oh, didn't I ever tell you? Nope. He says, when that fellow got, he says, I just turned, he was a good pilot. He wanted this guy, this was his first mission. He was a pilot of his own crew, this guy, co-pilot. And then they'd fly him as our co-pilot so that he would get some experience. But he froze it to controls. He said, I just handed it to him and we got hit. And he just straightened his hands out and stared straight ahead. He froze it to controls. And he says, I slapped him a few in here and that didn't help. And he says, I hit him a few times, or I slapped him a few times and that didn't help. And he says, I finally busted him a good one and got his attention. And that guy never flew again. Not as a pilot.
That whole thing mentally affected people in different ways.
Yeah, sure.
And
it was his first time. Now, if he'd been with his own crew,
yeah.
he might have taken them all down.
Yeah.
Don't know what happened.
Well, I think we'll end it there.
Any last thing that you would
And
like to
you guys want to get them too?
No, I have to be somewhere over on the west side of town at noon, so I have to.
Mr. Ruschman, is there anything more that you'd like to
No,
say?
that's enough.
Well, thank you.